Hello and welcome to the North Yorkshire Safeguarding Children Partnership podcast. My name's Hayden Rees-Jones and I'm a Policy and Development Officer for the partnership. In this podcast, we're going to discuss hidden harm, why it's important that we're aware of it, how we can spot hidden harm, and what we should do if we have any concerns. Today, you will hear from colleagues from across the partnership to highlight different aspects of hidden harm and what you should do if you believe a child or young person is at risk. I'm joined first by James Parks, Partnership Manager, to tell us about the NYSCP's Hidden Harm campaign. So James, can you tell me, what's the campaign all about?
Well, for us, hidden harm, just to be clear really in terms of the definition, is looking at harm or abuse that's usually hidden from the public view. So this usually occurs sort of behind closed doors and is often sort of unrecognised or reported to agencies. So we have an emphasis on spotting signs early and getting help to children, young people and families. So we appreciate that during this COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a variety of school closures, lockdowns that have happened across the last 12 months. And what this has meant is that children and young people and families have had lack of engagement with services that they would normally come across. So with children not being in education as we know it, having remote access, there's a number of different opportunities that we want to kind of really flag and highlight. Some of the challenges that children and young people might face are around sort of mental health. Poor social emotional mental health is an increasing area across the partnership, and we want to ensure that children and young people get the support they need to support their well-being. There's potential risk of exploitation by outside influences. There may be abuse going on within the family home. They may be subject to domestic abuse or substance misuse and a variety of other aspects. So as we return out of lockdown, what I'd like to do is ensure that everybody across the partnership and across communities take safeguarding is everybody's responsibility. And this is providing opportunities for children and young people to maybe disclose to us, or us as professionals being able to discover incidents that have happened whilst children have been at home or are not accessing the services that they may have accessed previously. Children and young people will start now to engage with more professionals. They will start to reintegrate into activities and clubs. And again, it's just about that kind of professional curiosity, making sure that people are looking out for particular signs and ultimately knowing where to report those to get the support that's needed for the children, young people and the wider family.
Working together to safeguard children tells us that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. Whether you work with children or adults, are a parent, carer, member of the family, a friend or a member of the community, we should all be mindful of hidden harm. Karen Hedgley, safeguarding nurse, explains the need for people working with children or young people, or those people working with adults whose family include children and young people, to be curious and consider what they know about a child if they identify a concern.
Identifying and responding to the needs of vulnerable children is rarely straightforward. Even for the most experienced professionals who have regular contact with children and their families, it can remain very challenging. Additionally, for many families, it's difficult for them to come forward and to seek help. So it's essential that as frontline practitioners, you maintain professional curiosity and remain alert to the possibility that any child you have contact with may be vulnerable or at risk of harm. Often it's about getting the basics right. Asking yourself, what do I already know about this child and their family? Have the family had previous involvement from safeguarding services? And if they had, what was the circumstances around those concerns and that involvement? Is there a history of parental conflict, for example, such as domestic abuse, an acrimonious separation or divorce that may be having a very negative emotional impact on the child? Are the parents vulnerable themselves? For example, they may have mental health issues or difficulties with substance misuse, either drugs or alcohol, that may be impacting on their ability to safely care for their children. It's also important to ask about the specifics about the children that you're working with as well. Do they have particular vulnerabilities, for example, emotional and mental health difficulties, Or do they have health needs that are not being met, either through being taken to appointments or the use of medication? This holistic picture is very important in order to understand the circumstances in which the child is living, and of course for us to consider the strengths within the family as we work with them to meet the child's needs.
I'd now like to welcome Sandra Rees from Scarborough Borough Council and Susan Sweeting from Selby District Council, who will explain how hidden harm may be identified in non-traditional safeguarding roles and in communities.
We've done an awful lot of work within the community with our businesses, particularly taxi drivers, hotels, and our staff and businesses that work within the nighttime economy. The reason for this is that we believe that they are the eyes and ears in our community. So they will hear a lot of things that potentially other people won't hear. So people might get into the back of a taxi, have conversations. Those conversations might be worrying. Taxi driver might think, well, not sure about that. Should that person, the young person particularly, should they know about those kind of things? They might be having a conversation or might be disclosing something. And we really want our taxi drivers to come forward and report that. So one of the things that we would say to our taxi drivers is don't sit on anything like that. Certainly report that to the school if you are dropping off to a school, or contact North Yorkshire County Council, or the police if you are really worried about that child might be at significant harm. Thirdly, really, domestic abuse incidents. People will get into the back of the cab, they might be arguing in the back of the cab, that conversation might get out of hand, you might be really worried about that person who might have, you're thinking to yourself, well, if they're behaving like that now, what would that be like when they get behind those closed doors? We would really encourage our taxi drivers to phone the police to make that report, and you can do that anonymously if you're not sure about it. We've also done the same within our nighttime economy with our businesses in the nighttime economy in relation to our door supervisors, in our licensed premises, in our takeaways, and at our holiday parks, all of which see a lot of people on a day-to-day basis and on an evening. And I'll give an example of that where quite often people might get separated from their friends, so they might all start out together, but actually what happens is they can't get into a nightclub or a pub because they've maybe had too much to drink. By the very fact that they've had too much to drink makes them vulnerable, and that quite often makes them a target to someone who is looking out to further exploit that vulnerability sexually. They might go up to them, they might go off the wrong way, they might end up, in water, for instance, if they're in the middle of York or in Whitby or somewhere where there's water, all of those things. So it's just about thinking a little bit wildly and not widely, not just thinking about the immediate what's happened that person's wandering off, but also the safeguarding risks around that as well. We've seen a number of really good positive relationships being built with our hotels here on the coast and our B&Bs, where people are booking in to hotels. So it might be a young person that is being booked in with an older adult. The child doesn't appear to know who the older adult is or appears frightened or scared. Don't be worried about asking some further questions, so probing a little bit more as to, who are you, where have you come from, how long you staying, and ask that of the child if they're able to answer those questions. But by all means, if you are worried about that individual and you're thinking something's just not right, then it normally isn't, as I've already said, and make that phone call through to the police. What you also might find as well is that people are bringing people to the coast around county lines, so they might be using hotels and B&Bs as places where they'll set up, and that child or that adult at risk might be being used within drugs to run drugs or gather drug debts, etc., or just being placed there to build a community to sort of get those drugs moving within that town. The local authorities do offer further training around all these subjects, and if you want to know more, we'd encourage you to do that.
I think the messages that Sandra's given are absolutely the key ones. That information of if it doesn't feel right, then usually it isn't. And to share those concerns, I think, is the main message that we give out at Selby District Council to all of our staff. We do a lot of work with our housing teams, our enforcement officers, the trade teams, customer contact. Every member of staff in our organisation is trained in safeguarding. And it's the key bit that when you are meeting members of the public and you're working with our community, is to always have in the back of your mind, does this feel right? If something doesn't, what do I need to do with that? Do I need to ask the questions, or do I need to do something further with the information that I've got? What we say to our teams, particularly our housing and trades teams, is that you're at the forefront. They're often in the community. They're going into people's homes. They are accessing areas of people's lives that isn't seen by other services, by the rest of the community. And that is something that's really, really important for our staff to understand, that when they are there, they will be able to witness and acknowledge when something's maybe changed. So our housing staff often have built a relationship with some of those individuals because of where they're allocated, and their homes are sort of managed by that same officer for a length of time. So they understand them. They know that when they go into a property and potentially the house that once was very, very clean and tidy, now all of a sudden is a bit more chaotic than it used to be, or it's dirty and the standards just aren't quite as they used to be. What is that? Is there an underlying health issue that maybe someone may need some support with, or is there something else that's going on, particularly at the moment where we've obviously got the COVID-19 pandemic and the restrictions? There's been significant knock-on to individuals' mental health, and they're not always ready or realising themselves that they maybe need to reach out or can access support, and that's where staff such as ours can do some of that work and offer that support. I think that's really important. Also, things where the children have been at home more and parents are beginning to see that maybe there's been a change in the behaviours outside of what they would expect their child to be demonstrating when there's been such a significant sort of change in their routine. But is that maybe an indication that the online gaming that they're accessing is of concern, that maybe they're showing things in conversation that would be a concern, talking about ideologies or just general behaviours in conversation that wouldn't be normal to themselves? And if parents are expressing those concerns, that's something that we can support them with as well, because it's not always clear what's on the other side of that of the game, of the console. So that's something that we've picked up on a few times, and just offering that support as well. I think as well what we see is there has been an increase in domestic abuse cases, and with that, are there the small indications? Are behaviours the same? Does conversation dry up in a property that maybe it wouldn't have done previously? Is there a check-in of other people in the room before the answer to questions? So all these things can be small steps that indicate something is going on that our officers can maybe pick up on, and they're trained in how to handle that as well. So being aware that if there is a concern about an individual, is it the right time there and then to have that conversation, and picking the appropriate time to do that, especially if there's a concern about potential domestic abuse. So yeah, I think again, it's going back to what Sandra said, it's saying if it doesn't feel right, usually that's an indication that something isn't right, and there's always that support from line managers and obviously from your designated safeguarding officers in the organisation to escalate and have those discussions. And if they're not available, or if the decision is quite clear, then you obviously contact North Yorkshire County Council to do that. I think outside of the home as well, what we've seen is, as people begin to access parks and public spaces, we have seen an increase in footfall, but maybe just being aware of some of those patterns of activity. So are children in the park who we would expect to be in school? That's often an indication that something's not quite right. What is it? Why is that young person in a park at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when we would expect them to be in the classroom? Who are they with? Does it look unusual that they're with, an adult that they don't necessarily know, don't appear to know very well? Does that conversation look awkward? Do they look intimidated? So it's all these small things and small steps that we can work together to pick up on, really. Sandra alluded to nighttime economy, but for parks and public spaces, if we've got crowds of young people who are there who maybe aren't usually there, it's a different set of young people, or with it again, are they being met by somebody that doesn't seem to be a part of that group or wouldn't normally naturally be part of that group. All of those things, they can be called into the police, and again, those welfare checks to be carried out. It's about seeing, spotting, and then actioning some of those concerns, and we can follow the guidelines that obviously are set for us and all the referral route.
I'm next joined by David Sharp from North Yorkshire Youth to explain how people working with children and young people in the voluntary sector can identify signs of hidden harm. David.
Hi Hayden, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to chat to you. I think it's really important that the VCS understands what hidden harm is, because at the end of the day, safeguarding is everyone's business, and whether or not you're just an individual who sees a young person once a week, or if you've got a really trusted relationship with a young person and with regular contact, understanding some of those signs is really important. So we're looking for things like, is there a change in behaviour? Is there any unexpected aggression that's coming from young people? Are we looking at them taking unhealthy risks, particularly around drugs and alcohol? Is there a sexual behaviour change slightly? Is it becoming more inappropriate? Is their language changing? Have they got different friend groups? And has that changed all of a sudden? So all of these things are sort of like the signs that we can see around hidden harm and things that are affecting young people. Because during the lockdown, we think that young people have had serious mental health issues, and we're seeing a lot of young people who we've never seen before doing that. There's been the opportunity for exploitation to take place, particularly online, because that's where most young people have been spending their time. There's obviously the domestic abuse side of things, because we aren't seeing young people on a regular basis. Parents and carers think that they can get away with things because other individuals and other adults aren't seeing that. And of course, then the final element of that is potentially substance misuse, getting hold of things online and that type of thing. So it's a whole raft of things that young people are experiencing at the moment. And through that, they're becoming very vulnerable. And through that vulnerability, they can then be exploited, whether or not that is by someone they think is a trusted adult, or whether that's a new group that's trying to get them involved in county lines or sexual exploitation or any of those sort of areas. So from a VCS perspective, if you see any of these types of things, please say something. So if you see something, say something. There's plenty of support networks out there available for you. If you're one of our members as North Yorkshire Youth, please just get in touch with one of our workers and we will then help you through the process. If you're not, then please just get in touch with North Yorkshire County Council and their safeguarding mass team, and they will be able to help you.
The national lockdowns have raised the risk of children being exposed to hidden harm from multiple areas, which can include physical, mental and domestic abuse, and also neglect. With many children and young people accessing the internet to continue their studies during lockdowns, there has been an increased risk of online abuse, which may include exposure to extremist and radical views. I'm joined now by Detective Chief Inspector Dave Ellis, who will explain.
The lockdown situation obviously means that potentially there is an increased risk to some children of being potentially victims of radicalisation. Children can be exposed to different views and receive information from various sources, especially through online sources. And some of these views may be considered radical or extreme. Radicalisation is the process through which a person comes to support or be involved in extremist ideologies. It can result in a person becoming drawn into terrorism and is in itself a form of harm. The process of radicalisation might involve a young person being groomed online or in person, might involve exploitation, including sexual exploitation, also psychological manipulation, exposure to violent material and other inappropriate information, and it might involve the risk of physical harm or death through extremist acts. So with young people, it can happen so gradually that a child or young person who is affected by it might not realise what it is that they're being drawn into. Anyone can be radicalised, but there are some factors which may make a young person more vulnerable to radicalisation. And these can include being easily influenced or impressionable, having low self-esteem or being isolated, feeling that rejection, discrimination or injustice is taking place in society, experiencing community tension amongst different groups, being disrespectful or angry towards family and peers, having a strong need for acceptance or belonging, or experiencing grief such as loss of a loved one. Obviously, these factors will not always lead to radicalisation, but they are potential factors of vulnerability. If a child or young person is being radicalised, their day-to-day behaviour might become increasingly centred around an extremist ideology, group, or cause. For example, they might spend increasing amounts of time talking to people with their extreme views, which might include online and offline communication. They might change their style of dress or personal appearance. They might lose interest in friends and activities that are not associated with the extremist ideology, group, or cause. They might have materials or symbols associated with an extreme cause, and they also might try to recruit others to join the cause. Some organisations have a prevent duty to identify vulnerable children and young people and prevent them from being drawn into terrorism. These organisations include schools, registered childcare providers, local authorities, police, prisons and probation services, and NHS trusts and foundations. For more information on the prevent duty, look at the government website. Let's talk about it.
If you think a child or a young person needs help, highlighting this need can help them get the support and avoid safeguarding concerns. Barbara Marigold, Head of Early Help, explains.
Early help starts with the question, are you okay? Early help, also known as early intervention, is providing the right support to families at the right time to achieve change that lasts. It can be provided at any stage in a child or young person's life, from pre-birth through to the teenage years. Early help services can work with parents, children and families, but the main focus is to improve outcomes for children and help prevent any situation from escalating or further problems arising. But for early help to be effective, all local organisations should work together to identify those children and families who would benefit from a service or support. As with safeguarding children and young people, early help is everyone's responsibility. Anyone can be the first person to offer support to a child, young person and their family, a neighbour, a friend, a taxi driver or a local business owner, as well as all those who already work in any capacity with children and young people. In North Yorkshire, we work alongside our partners in the wider early help community to support parents, young children and their families. We recognise that COVID has been particularly hard for families. Some families have had to juggle home working with providing home learning for their children. First-time parents have not had the opportunities to socially interact with either their own family network or other parents living in the community with new babies, losing opportunities to share worries and gain reassurance from others going through the same experience. As a service, we've continued to offer support to families, both with direct face-to-face support and also activities and groups for children, young people and their families, which we were very quickly able to move to a virtual offer. However, we are aware that for some families, although they may be struggling, they feel unable or unsure of who to ask for support. This is where we work with the child, the family and their community to keep children safe. If you know or become aware of a child or family in your community who you feel may need support, please just ask, are you okay?
If you have a concern about a child, whether as a member of the child's family, a family friend, as a member of the public, or if you work with children and young people, you need to pass on your concerns so the child can receive the help and support they need to stay safe. Danielle Johnson, Head of Safeguarding for the Children and Families Service, will explain how you can raise your concerns.
If you're a member of the public and you're worried about a child, please contact North Yorkshire Multi-Agency Screening Team on 01609 780 780. Where you have immediate concerns about the safety of the child, please contact the police. Professionals in all agencies have a responsibility to refer a child where it is believed or suspected that a child has suffered significant harm or is likely to suffer significant harm, or where there's welfare needs that can only be met through the provision of services. We would ask that you complete the universal referral form and send that to the multi-agency screening team without delay. Whenever you're making referral, it's good practice that you work in partnership with families, that you tell parents and carers about your concerns and seek consent for making that referral. There are times when consent is not required and that's accepted, where you believe that informing parents or carers will place a child at significant risk of harm.
As has already been discussed, if you have a concern, you can call 01609 780 780. Another way you can raise your concern is by using the Partnership Information Sharing Form. This form is designed to give those people working with children and young people a safe and direct way to share information with the police. For more information, visit the North Yorkshire Safeguarding Children Partnership website at safeguardingchildren.co.uk. Thank you to everyone who's contributed to this podcast, and thank you for listening. Please remember to subscribe for future content, and don't forget to visit our website safeguardingchildren.co.uk, follow us on Twitter at NYSCP1, and follow our Facebook page. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to tell us your concerns.